Hot Cocoa Poncho. Her handle on Instagram as well as YouTube is TL Yarn Crafts, and I did the Honeycomb Tunisian stitch. You can see that here all throughout. She labels this as a beginner pattern, and it definitely is. So let me run through what I did to create this beauty. So I made Toni Lipsey's Hot Cocoa Poncho as a holiday gift for one of my family members. And I'm going to guide you through what I did to actually create it. So this is what it looks like. I used similar colors, but just in reverse. And let's take a look at the details and how she tells you to create this beautiful poncho. All right, so first things first, I used a similar brand of yarn, but a different type. So she used, let's scroll on down. She used Lion brand Wool Ease, and she used the color Mushroom, which she said is discontinued, and another color in combination. So this is the type of yarn that she used, the Woolies, and this is I believe a 4, right? A medium weight number 4, and I used Lion brand as well, but I used Comfy Cotton Blend. I used this color as well as Cool Night. It's not popping up. Not sure why it's not popping up, but this is the other color that I used, and this yarn is category 3, so it's slightly thinner than the other one. Alright, here is the color here's the other color that I used. I believe that is it. Yes, so that was the other color that I used. And so it's slightly smaller, and so I had to alter the instructions for my liking. I made a size large, extra large, so these were the dimensions of it, 26 inches by 60 inches. The directions, however, are for small, medium, so 22 inches by 50 inches. She used 5 balls of the Lion brand Woolies and 2 balls of the other color, the mushroom color. I used three skeins of this color and one of the whipped cream color. So one of this to create the poncho. She used an 8mm Tunisian crochet hook. I used a 6mm Tunisian crochet hook, and I believe my cord was about 24 inches. I didn't measure it, so I'm not quite sure. But you do need a pretty lengthy cord for this. The pattern is really simple. You're doing honeycomb. If you're not sure how to do honeycomb, on this website, which is awesome, she has a video tutorial of how to actually do the honeycomb stitch. But her directions are pretty clear on how to do it, and it's pretty easy and simple to do once you get into it. I did have a couple of hiccups, and that's because I didn't do the math initially, and I never knew the importance of a gauge. So her gauge is here, 6-inch square, 19 stitches by 15 rows, and I didn't realize how important this gauge was until further into the project. And so if I would have done the math initially, I wouldn't have had to take it out or add on or anything like that. So if you plan to use a different type of yarn, like I do all the time, the gauge is very important for you to do the calculations. And I'll show you the calculations that I did in order to figure out the measurement so that it would align. So let's just go through what she did in the beginning. So first you're going to start off with the body. Again, this is super easy because you're only creating 2 rectangles, and then you're seaming it together with 3 different seams, and so it makes it fairly simple. The body, she's starting off with the foundation, and she's using her color A, and she's chaining 70, 82, or 102. So that's the small, the extra large, or the 2XL. I wish that this was changed because this foundation row is really supposed to be the length. So it's either going to be 22 inches, 26 inches, or 32 inches. And so it would have been easier, so I don't have to do any math to tell me that the length of my starter chain needs to be 22 inches, 26 inches, or 32. But I did calculate how many chains that I needed to start off with, and I'll show you that shortly. But I wish that this just told me the length. That way it would have been just so much easier. But this is the honeycomb pattern. Very short. It's row 1 and row 2 repeating over and over again to create the honeycomb stitch. And you do this for the entire width of it. So either 50 inches, 60 inches, or 72 inches. So I did 60 inches. So it took me quite some time to do it. To get it to 60 inches long. And once you finish that, you finish the first part, and then you work on the cowl. And the cowl is going to take you way less time because it's much shorter than creating the body. The cowl, I did the middle one, so 82, so it measured the same exact length, or width. It's the length actually. So it measured the same exact length that I used up in the first one. So if you look here, it says chain 82. So however many I converted, that's the same amount of stitches that I started with. So you started off with 82 to do that, and then you repeat the same honeycomb pattern. I did have to do some calculations to figure out the rows, and I had to determine, okay, well, based on the size of yarn that I'm using, as well as the crochet hook that I'm using, how wide is this actually supposed to be? And so I'll show you the calculations so you can see how I figured that out. Once you've completed all the rows, so you see here, this goes up to 23, row 23, and this cowl is approximately a little bit more than 9 inches long, so way less than the body. The body for me was 60, and this is 9. So to finish this off, I thought it was a little bit confusing. She used this illustration here to give you a visual of what you're supposed to do next. So what you had to do is you take your long rectangle that you've created. So mine was 60, I believe 60 inches or 50 inches, I can't remember. But you fold it in half at points A. B and C are, you kind of don't need to pay attention to them at all, and this is where it gets kind of confusing. So if you look at the directions, step 2, it says seam from point A toward point B until 12 or 12.75 or 13.75 inches from fold. So what you're essentially doing is you're going to seam from A towards this fold. Your width of your cowl is either going to be 12 inches, 12.75, or 13.75. So from this fold towards A, it's either going to measure 12, 12.75, or 13.75. So what I did was I used a stitch marker. First, I measured from the fold towards A 12.75. So I measured that, and then I put the stitch marker there to tell me, okay, this is where I'm supposed to stop seaming. And then I seam from A towards that stitch marker, which is also towards the fold. And so that made it much more clear. I did figure it out eventually, but those are the steps that I took. I measured 12 or 12.75, 13.75 from the fold, put the stitch marker there, and then it was folded in half, of course, when I did that, and then I seamed from A of both ends towards here after it was folded in half. So I hope that makes this part a little less confusing if you're also confused by reading the directions as well. But let's get into the calculations on how I was able to break all of this down. So this is the gauge that she used. So she used 6 inches is going to be equal to 19 stitches by 15 rows. Alright, so the first thing that we needed to do was, in the beginning, remember I said that thought that it should have been whatever the width was, which would have been much easier. So in my case it was 26 inches, but to do the conversion I needed to figure out, okay, well, how many chains do I need to start off first and foremost using the yarn that I was using, because it's slightly smaller than the yarn that she was using, and I also used a smaller crochet hook than what she used. She used an 8 and I used a 6, and so that's going to make a big difference. And so what I had to do was figure out, okay, well, how many stitches do I need to do? So what I did was I said that, okay, well, she did hers based on a measurement of, she did the small medium, right? So the width was 22 inches, right? So we have our 22 inches, and we're going to divide it by 6 inches because it tells us that every 6 inches you're doing 19 stitches. So when we divide this, it gives us a value of 3.66 repeating, right? So then what I did from here was I multiplied this by the 19 stitches, and this is going to tell me how much I'm actually supposed to chain. So when you do the math for this, it comes up to 69.9, and that is her chain 70, which is here. So I said, okay, great. Now that I know that, I created a gauge to see, okay, how many chains is going to be equivalent to 6 inches. So when I used my 6mm crochet hook with the type of yarn that I use, I got 25 stitches. So 6 inches for me equals 25 stitches. And so I'm going to take this same 3.66 here, and I'm going to multiply it by my 25 stitches. And when I multiply by 25 stitches, my answer comes up to 91.6. And so I needed to start off with 92 chains. I wish I would have done that initially because it would have made my life so much easier. I wouldn't have had to watch an additional video, which I watched this video, which showed me how to basically add on from where I was, so how to join as you go in Tunisian crochet. So I watched this video of hers to add on a longer width for the scarf. But that's how I calculated this part. And then once you continue on, like, there's no mathematical calculation for this. So you just keep going until you get to 50 inches, 60 inches, or 72 inches. So that's the first part. To determine, okay, what is the length of this cowl going to be? The length and width of the cowl. So first, to start off, the width of the cowl is going to be 82. I used 82 as my measurement, and so remember we already did the conversion from last time, so I needed to chain 92 using my yarn and the hook that I was using. So I chained 92, and now I needed to figure out, okay, well, how many rows do I actually have to complete so that it is going to be the same, I'm not sure if it's length or width, but the same amount of rows that will give the same length or width of the cowl. So this part is the rows is going to go upward. So upward, I believe, is going to be your length. So the length of the cowl. So here she does a total of, I think, 23 rows. Yeah, 23 rows. So I needed to figure out, well, how many rows do I need to complete? So we go back to her gauge, which is super helpful. 6 inches is going to be equivalent to 15 rows. So I needed to go back to the gauge that I created to figure out, okay, well, how many rows is 6 inches for mine? And so for mine, my 6 inches was equal to 22 rows. Okay, so that was mine. And so I'm going to use this 22 rows to help me figure out, okay, well, how much do I actually need to create? So I did a couple of steps here, so I hope that this is going to be easy for you to follow through. So the first thing I did was I did row 1 through 12. Row 1 through 12, you were repeating the honeycomb pattern in one color. So I wanted to make sure that whatever my first color was going to be, that I repeated that for this length. So I needed to figure that out first. Row 1 through 12, how long is this supposed to be? How many rows am I supposed to do? So the first thing I did was, okay, well, let me figure out how many inches it actually was. So I took the 12 rows and I created a proportion or a ratio. The 12 rows there by the 15 rows, which gives me 6 inches. And I wanted to figure out, okay, well, how many inches is that going to be equivalent to? So I do it over 6 because it's 6 inches. And when I put it into the calculator, I got 4.8. Okay, so this 4.8 is going to help me to now determine, okay, well, how do I determine mine? So remember, my 6 inches is 22 rows. So I have my 22 rows here. And I'm trying to figure out how many rows do I actually need to create. So I'm going to create the ratio where I have 4.8. That's the length that I'm trying to create of this one color, of the same color. And when you solve for this area here, so we do 22 times 4.8, divide that by 6, we get 17.6. So essentially, I would need 18 rows that are in the same color here. So whatever color A I chose, which was actually this same color, or the light color, that is what I did for 18 rows. Then I needed to figure out the rows 13 to 22. So for rows 13 to 22, I needed to figure out the rest of the length. Okay, so the last part for me to figure out is how many rows do I need in order to complete this. So from rows 13 to 22, you're alternating colors. So whatever 2 colors you chose, you're going to be alternating from rows 13 to 22. And I need to figure out, okay, how many rows do I need to complete this off? And row 23 is whatever you use for your first color, you just make that one last row. So I needed to figure out how many rows do I need to complete in entirety. We know that for the first part, I needed to complete 18 rows. Now I need to figure out, okay, so from row 19, where do I stop? So I calculated I had to figure out, okay, what's the length of this entire section? So this entire cowl, how long is it actually? And then that will help me to determine how many rows that I need to do to complete this. So we know that she has 23 rows. So we're going to do 23 rows. Oops, 23 rows. And remember, we have 15 rows as her gauge. So we know that this is going to be longer than 6 inches, but we need to know, okay, well, how long is it actually? So 23 rows divided by 15, and we're going to find out what this value is, which tells us how many inches long is the entire cowl. And so when we do the math for this, 23 times 6 divided by 15, our answer is going to be 9.2 inches. So the entire cowl is going to be 9.2. That's the length of it. And so now I need to figure out, okay, well, how many rows do I actually have to do? All right, so remember that I'm not using 15 as my base, minus 22. So I'm going to do 22. And I'm trying to figure out how many rows I need to complete. So this part I'm trying to figure out. And we're going to use the same length. So 9.2 is going to be the end length of this cowl divided by 6. Okay, so I'm going to do the math. 9.2 times 22 divided by 6. And that is going to give us an answer of 33.7. So that means that I need to go all the way up to 34 rows. So going from row 19 all the way to row 33, I'll be alternating colors, and then the 34th row I'm going to do with whatever the first color was. And then how I ended it off was I didn't do the slip stitch. I did actually, sorry. So I did finish off with a slip stitch for the entire row, and then I bind it off after that. But I hope that this math helps you to figure out your proportions if you're using a different yarn than what she used. And I'd love to see your products, and I'm sure Toni would love to see your version of her design. I hope this helped. This is a reverse side, the wrong side of the poncho, so you can see what it looks like. Literally all you're doing is making 2 rectangles. The first rectangle is this long part here, and then the second rectangle is this top part here. And you're only going to do 3 seams. So this is one of the seams here in the collar. The second seam is here, attaching the collar to the body, and this is the third one, closing up that big rectangle. This is the final addition that I added. Once I completed the poncho, I decided to add a white border at the bottom of the poncho, and I used this video. I showed you guys this video earlier in order to add an extension onto the bottom of the poncho, and I did this all the way around. So if you decide to add a border on, continuing the same honeycomb pattern around, just make sure you check out her video to figure out how to add the border. And once I added the border, I think I added about, I did 3 additional rows of honeycomb, and then the last row was a slip stitch all the way around. If you've made this yourself, let me know in the comments below. I hope you have fun and enjoy making this beauty by Toni Lipsey.